Hello, everyone, and welcome to StarrCast, the podcast for wellness professionals. This is Lisa Starr, and today we're traveling halfway around the world. We've had a lot of talk in the media about Africa and African wellness and what's happening over there. And I think it's time to dive a little deeper. So we are joined today by two guests from the African continent, Michelle Saudan and Mariane Akwenye. Is
Correct.
that right?
Akwenye.
Akwenye. Okay, I'm going to start over. That was not good. Akwenye. Hello, listeners. It's Lisa Starr back with another episode of StarrCast, the podcast for wellness professionals. So today we're going to take a journey halfway around the world, and we are joined by two illustrious ladies from the continent of Africa. If you've been following wellness, you've heard a lot about Africa in the news in the last few years because there are so many amazing indigenous practices there, but it is still a bit of a mystery to much of the rest of the world. So we're going to pull back the veil a little bit with our guests today, Michelle Saudan and Mariane Akwenye, who are joining us from Africa. So welcome, ladies. Thanks for being here.
Thank you for having us.
So let's start by diving a little bit into each of your histories. And Mariane, let's start with you. Tell us what your current role is in spa and wellness in Africa, and then a little bit about your journey to that post.
Right. So my current role is the chairperson for the African Wellness Initiative by Global Wellness Institute. And I also operate and own a wellness group where we have a training institute, we have spas, and we also manufacture our own indigenous range of cosmetics. And that's what I currently am doing. But my journey started in aviation, funny enough. I started flying as a pilot.
So you were a pilot?
But I was a pilot, yes. I'm Namibia's first Black female pilot.
Amazing.
But it helped me tremendously, actually, that role, because the country was looking up to me, and I was asked to inspire young people or young girls whenever I would be back in the country. And that's really where I noticed that there's a huge lack of just skills. And being interested in the wellness sort of space, I also saw on the other side of the world how wellness was presented and how the world embraced wellness and how it could, it was excellent careers for young women from all over the world that enable them to travel and be able to uplift themselves. So those are the two worlds that I was in. And then I thought, let me come back home and do this.
So your being a pilot really helped your perspective in multiple ways, because you were able to travel outside of Namibia, your home country, and see what was happening elsewhere and realizing, oh, we could have this at home.
Absolutely. Because at home at the time, as a career and an industry, it was almost non-existent. And there was no ways I would have stayed within the country and known what the world was doing. So aviation actually exposed me and allowed me to see what was happening and bring it back.
And Michelle, what's your story? I think you had some travel in yours as well.
I did, yes. I started my career in cruise ships. I worked for Steiner as a inothermist, column as a facial therapist. And then my career just evolved. They say sometimes you're drawn and pulled into different directions based on your clients, So I naturally had a vested interest in indigenous healing arts, but I just didn't know how to connect the dots. So I went the Western way. So I went into sound healing therapy. I'm a trauma-informed facilitator for women's circles, somatic therapist, and then worked in management, and now finally launched Amanzi Wellbeing, that is dedicated to creating retreats that are focused on Africa's unique wellness assets. and the culture, the people.
Well, let's talk a little bit about the culture of the people. We hear, in the Western world, you hear Africa and you think it's like one big country, right? But it's not. In reality, it is 54 countries with all different sets of practices, rituals, geography, weather, everything. I mean, it's a very diverse place, but I think that there are some cultural uh, threads that run through Africa. What would you say those are?
I would say they're more community-based interventions.
Mm-hmm.
And we'd go back to the philosophy of Ubuntu itself, which is a Bantu philosophy, um, translated into I am who I am because of who we all are. So you'll find that a lot of the rituals, everything in Africa is done communally. There is no separation from the individual and their community. So healing, rituals, ceremony, even modern day practices are all done in community. So yes, I'm digressing here, but I would say community-based interventions.
Okay,
Yeah.
that's excellent. And Marianne, do you have something to share?
Yeah, sure. I 100% agree with Michelle. Absolutely. Everything is community based. But what I would like to add is that it's also very much elders, healers,
Mm-hmm.
sort of shamans, what we know as every community has that person that you sort of tap into and go for spiritual guidance, healing, all of those things. I think those are the two distinct sort of aspects when it comes to wellness on the continent that is across the board.
Do you have wellness practices in your homes growing up that were just commonplace?
Oh, absolutely. And I think for me, as a girl child growing up in the household, one of the common practices that stands out, when you ask this question is whenever my dad would come from work, because most of the workforce at the time were laborers, so of course it's hard work. One of my duties as a girl child was to always have handy a bucket of warm water. There would always be salt, sea salt, and you'd put it in there, and it was a ritual. He'll come from work before he does anything else. He'll sit down. I'll sit at his feet, and I'll be washing his feet.
Mm-hmm.
And, as you evolve and get into the world and you go to spas and they'll do a welcome ritual by washing feet, and it sort of takes you back. Oh, we used to do that as just, so yes, there's a lot of those practices that we naturally do and not equate them or take them back to as a wellness practice.
And then for us, tea
Yeah.
was a practice.
Mm-hmm.
And very much like Mariana said, there is no definition. Like we don't say, oh, we're sitting down to have a tea ceremony or it's a ritual. It's just the natural way of being. So the essence of going to the garden and depending on the season, because the gardens are not, tamed gardens. The garden is the whole field,
Mm-hmm.
and you'd go there and depending on the season, pick whatever bush tea is in season that time. And that's what we would brew and always, morning and evening, always sat together as a family. And that's where we spoke, and over bush tea. So that was something that we practiced.
I love that. Thank you for sharing those. So, flash forward to today, the current state of wellness in Africa. You have pockets that are fairly well developed. South Africa has a very rich spa culture. There's probably at least 300 day spas there, hotel spas, very nice ones. There are safari spas. You have Morocco has a good pocket of very high-end spas, but those are two different ends of the country. What would you say is happening across Africa when it comes to wellness as a business?
Uh, yeah, as you rightfully said, Lisa, there are those pockets that has been well as developed. commercialized. The systems are in there. And then across the board, there are the pockets that are individuals doing extraordinary work. They are not commercialized per se or organized in a way that the world will notice. And I think it's one of the things as the initiative, the African Wellness Initiative, we're trying to bring together to say and identify who and where are our practitioners, what is happening on the continent, so that we have that database and the background, which is going to be such an eye opener for the world. I think people will be as surprised as we are also, finding out that there are amazing practitioners and practices being done on the continent.
Just to add to that, I think, yes, there are a few really great establishments that are set up in the way the spas in South Africa and Morocco are. But the ones that are not is, I think, where we're missing it is, one, the lack of awareness of what wellness is to us, for us, and also the value of it. The understanding of the value of what well-being, the impact in sort of a wellness setting. We have individual buckets, individual practices, but it's not collated under a wellness setting, because there's a lot of misconception, and there isn't enough understanding on what that is,
Yeah.
Yeah.
What is wellness?
Right. And who's going to be spending the money is something else we have to think about. I mean, when we look at the Global Wellness Institute's Economy Monitor report, last one on Africa, was that between North Africa and Sub-Saharan Africa, it was about 8-9 billion in revenue. Now, the growth rate is the fastest, right? I mean, among all the world regions, it's the fastest in Africa. But of course, that's because it was coming from, a position of being behind. So they're trying to catch up. And you've got so many people living there, and yet a very viable tourist business too. Who do we want to build the wellness for, right? Is it for the tourist trade? Is it for the people who live in Africa? What should be the approach to really get a groundswell moving?
I
I
would
think
say
it
it's a
should.
little bit.
Oh,
Okay, go
sorry.
for it.
Yeah, that's a juicy one,
I
Lisa.
know. Go for it.
Well, personally, professionally, I would say for the people, it's got to start from a grassroots level. And if they can be parallel and work in synergy, then that would be perfect. That would be ideal. But I think with where we are currently in the current climate of the wellness industry across the continent, I believe that it has to start from the people, for the people, and then only then can we, once we've defined first what it is for Africans, for the across cultures, then I think we can be able to say, hey, world, this is what we have to offer,
Yeah. I couldn't agree more. And that's exactly what I wanted to also add in, is to say, once we know the value of what we have, I think the approach to it will be completely different. It's the unknown. Hence, it's done in pockets. It's done, just as a way of being, and not realizing the value that lies within that.
Those are great answers. And I think you're right, probably. I mean, if the population doesn't embrace it, how can you effectively present it to the rest of the world? But as we said, Africa is a huge place. I mean, how do you conquer that? Because it's not been an easy road, to get buy-in from all these different regions. I mean, what you two are really taking on a massive task. Do you have a plan to sort of divide up the country in quadrants, or start country by country? Like, how do you even tackle taming a continent, as it were?
I think the enthusiasm, the bravado and the bravery of us saying, yes, we're going to do it. We're so passionate about it. We, of course, put up our hands. But I think now that we're in it and realizing the mammoth task ahead of us, it's daunting. It really is a big task. But so far so good, Michelle. So far, we're going with it. But yes, we have a few. I think we what we're trying to do is have a few goals that we are going to be able to achieve instead of trying to chew off too much. And once we achieve one goal, we tackle the next one and so on. So we have certain goals as AWI that we're wanting to achieve, and then those will lead into other goals and making it sustainable.
Yeah, well, I'd like to add that, ancestrally, the way tribes were managed was the way they worked in unity was when each tribal leader was called and they sat together and they spoke, which is why I have the tree in the background, because it was always around the tree of life, you know. So our approach is by firstly expanding our database, which is something that we've already done, and we've got 15 African countries so far, representatives. We call them allies or friends of the African Wellness Initiative, or practitioners, different roles. And the way that we would strategically be able to succeed is by bringing all these people from all these different countries together. And we've slowly started doing that in batches. Just 2 weeks ago, we had a call with, a few ladies from Mozambique and Jamaica, yeah, Afro-Caribbean. So it's possible. It's huge. It's possible, but we're making definitely good headway, and we have a plan in place. So that's how we're going about it.
That's awesome. I'm glad that you have goals that are near term, and you start slow. It's a big task, but I'm my money's on you. You're up for it. So
Thank you.
along with the goals, I mean, some topics that come up when discussing African wellness are sort of, well, let me say an experience. When I've been in Africa and gone to a spa and I want to have a facial or a massage, sometimes they bring out brands and practices that are from Europe or somewhere else in the West. And because that's who trained them, right? And I understand how it happens, but it's not African. And then you may go to a safari spa, which I have done, and you have some sort of body treatment or massage while you're looking out at the landscape, and they're using more indigenous ingredients or practices, and that's so much more authentic. And I'm sure that's the way that you want to proceed. But there's not a lot of infrastructure in Africa for training and bringing these brands and these practices to the forefront. So how can we help tackle that? What's your plan for that?
I think, yeah, it has to start at the grassroots. The way the training schools, the beauty schools are structured, it's very much Western. The products that they use in there are Western. So of course, the natural evolution of it is then to have the end product of a spa that looks like a Western spa, because that is what they're comfortable with. What we alluded to in the beginning, when we are going to start at the grassroots and trying to find our own value within what we are offering. I think when it starts there, that's when it's going to sort of emerge from, to say, this practice by this elder or by this tribe, when they do this, it means that. And we slowly bring all those practices and knowledge within mainstream wellness as we will define it on the continent. And you're right. I mean, I work with a lot of tourists that come to the country, and that is exactly what they ask for. they will tell you, but I didn't travel to Africa for this European experience. When it comes to wellness, I want to have an African wellness experience. What is that? So,
Well,
of course, the need is there. Yeah,
I was going to say, in fairness, that that is probably within the last 10 years has
only, yes.
developed
Yeah.
because there wasn't another option. And tourists were not as adventurous, right? I mean, they wanted the familiar, especially being in a place that can feel very strange to you. But now I think consumers are so much more aware of wellness and the practices and the options that they are seeking more interesting and indigenous um, options when they travel. So that's new, but I think it's new in a good way. Do you agree?
Yeah, absolutely. Yes. I think you also find it with food. When you look at the culinary world, with the tourists, before they wanted to have specific things that they're familiar with, the dishes that they could understand, but they have since evolved into, let's try what is indigenous, we'll try that. And I think it's spilling over to all other experiences, and wellness being one of them.
Um, it's a good thing when you ask the question, Lisa, how do you tackle that? And I think when we look at African brands that are doing exceptionally well, I'll reference a lady by the name, her brand is I Am Hamamat, and she just produces shea butter and gets the whole community involved. And you see videos of the women in the village churning that shea butter, and she's got millions of followers, and it gets shipped all over the world, across Africa. So I think how do we tackle that is first and foremost knowledge, embracing authenticity for local people to know that what you have is so powerful in its most simplest form.
Yeah.
Yeah, and just embracing that authenticity. Because sometimes I know with the few brands in Zimbabwe where I'm originally from, they get stuck because we're trying to measure up with, you know, a La Prairie brand, and say is it, the packaging and everything just doesn't, if it doesn't look like that, then it's not good enough.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, we do have to encourage consumers to move beyond that. And I think people are. They're aware that so much money, especially in cosmetics and skincare retailing, so much money is spent on the message, the packaging, the ads in the magazines. And you want that investment to be in the product, right? So we want the best, purest product. And of course, you need to have good packaging, but it doesn't have to compare to La Prairie, if it's good and it works and it's authentic. And I think that that is beginning to outweigh in the minds of consumers that urge to have it all be
Lisa, I'm
high
sorry,
end.
Great.
it's
Yeah, I thought it
freezing.
was me.
Yeah.
Okay. What did you hear? Is it back on?
Sorry, Lisa, it's going in and out.
Odd.
It's back on now. Yeah.
Okay. What
Yeah.
was the last thing you heard me say?
Oh,
Magazine.
yeah.
It was magazines, but it was slurred.
Okay, we'll
Yeah, we
take it
couldn't.
over. I'll start it over.
Okay.
Um, so we were talking about packaging and products and consumers expecting something to look like a high-end brand from a Western department store. And it's not going to look that way from Africa, but the
Yeah.
products are pure and authentic. And the money wants to go into the product, not the packaging. So that's another sort of learning, I guess, we'll have to a barrier we'll cross with consumers. But if you're coming to Africa and you're looking for authenticity, it's not going to look like a La Prairie bottle.
Absolutely.
And there are
Absolutely.
there are
The
a number
value,
of African cosmetic brands at this point, and skincare brands, are there not?
Oh, yes. They are quite a lot that are international. I mean, I'm back and forth, but I'm currently based in Dubai. and way that is in Carif if in the
Michelle,
organic
you're
section,
also
so
breaking up.
baobab powder and moringa powder.
Michelle, could you
Okay.
say that again?
Um,
You were
Yeah,
breaking up.
you're
Sorry.
breaking up.
okay. Okay. Is it okay now? Back on?
Yes, back on.
Yes.
Okay. I was mentioning that in Zimbabwe, there is a brand. Perfect. So there is from Zimbabwe, there is a brand that is distributing moringa, baobab,
Mhm,
resurrection bush tea in Carrefour, if you're familiar with the market.
mhm.
And you know that they're doing so well. So there is massive potential.
Yeah.
We just need to get these
As
brands
well
out
as
of
from
Africa.
Namibia, the marula oil.
Mm, of course.
Yeah. So marula oil is very high in demand, and it's one of our biggest exports for cosmetics in its raw form. That then goes and, supplied to big, big beauty brands in America, in Europe, and so on.
Well, that
So,
brings me to another point, Mariane, that we had touched on earlier, which was the access, right? I mean, you've got big brands coming into the continent of Africa, pharma, cosmetics, and extracting ingredients that your locals don't really have access
I'm
to.
sorry, Lisa. It's
yeah,
stopped.
Rose.
I don't know what's going
So,
on.
sorry, Lisa, we lost you there.
That's
Yeah,
okay. I'll say
it's
it again.
totally gone.
I apologize. I don't know what's going on with the signal under the ocean. Um, so, Mariane, you raise a
Okay,
good point
ask again. I think it's that.
you raise a good point, Mariane. We have big pharma companies and cosmetic companies coming into the continent of Africa and extracting ingredients that are indigenous to you and taking them and using them in products elsewhere in the world. But the locals don't always have access to that. I mean, how can we change that equation? I'm not even sure there's an easy way.
It's not an easy way. And again, it's that thing of the locals not understanding the value in the product that they have, but also having the infrastructure to then manufacture or have the end product, the whole process to the end product. The capacity is not there. It's easier to just, take it out in its raw form. The processing facilities are not available or accessible, or the funding for it is not. So it's a multi-layered issue, but there are pockets of companies that have started to go head on and develop and export a complete product, but not at the rate that is significantly making inroads. So it's a complex question and a complex problem to fix.
Indeed.
But it starts also, it needs the government, the policies to be in place to say we cannot just extract these raw ingredients. Maybe put in policies to say when you extract a ton, have a ton locally and put some value to it as an example, because the locals need to understand what the value is in that raw product or raw ingredient.
I'd like to also add that in some cases, the communities are well aware of the product they have, but there's nothing in place to protect them or protect that product. So to add on to policymakers, the government needs to have a firmer stand on fair trade that is equal across the board.
That's a difficult thing to tackle with all the different governments that are involved, for sure. But it's something to think about. It's just another challenge of which you have many. What beyond what we've discussed, the geography and the government, what other challenges are there for developing the wellness industry in Africa? Maybe one thing I'll mention would be licensing, right? I mean, I'm sure many countries don't have licensing for therapists or training. So, what things are some of the goals you have to tackle as part of the African Wellness Initiative? What do you think is the first thing you need to do?
it's such a multi-layered question and problem that there is, because at every level, I believe there is a challenge, to have an organized sort of training association, for instance. What is our benchmark? What training are we going to be giving? As an example, are we going to give licensing for a Swedish massage, or are we trying to develop our own African wellness massage, for a lack of a better word? Who is the custodian of that? So it's so multi-layered. That's why I don't have a single answer to say, oh, this is the solution to that problem. In every stage and every step, I think we need to dissect it and see, where do we start to tackle this specific problem, whether it's training, whether it's products, whether it's the definition of African wellness, whether yeah,
So many things.
very many things. Michelle?
I believe creating a bridge where there's an integration with the traditional healers associations with the wellness spaces. Because, the World Health Organization has already advocated for the integration of traditional healers into modern healthcare. So in most of the countries, for example, Ghana, Nigeria, Zimbabwe, I know definitely have a traditional healers association. So it's being able to have the conversations with them, and as well as, our traditional westernized spas, and seeing how we can, revere these practices and merge them together.
So a lot of this success will rest on you too, getting some help, right? You can't do this alone.
Absolutely.
Empowering the future generations and helping them understand, what's a strategy to do that? How can you teach the young people, like you learned, Mariane, when you left as a pilot and came back and saw the opportunities that were elsewhere? How do we make that filter down now?
I think initiatives like these is definitely very critical in that aspect, because we create awareness. We create because in as an example, when we started with our training institute, grassroots level, taking that young girl who hasn't finished school for whatever reason to try and give her a skill and elevate her, the backlash was from even her own guardians or the parents not understanding what this world is about, and thinking, what is my child going to do? Because it's not your traditional professions that everybody, think that it's better off, or so on.
We
So
have that
it
in the
was
West too, but yes, for sure.
yeah, because of course, when a child goes to school, or when, it's not just for the betterment of that child, is again the whole community and uplifting. Sort of it all rests on this one child's shoulders to better herself or himself, so that the whole sort of family, community, that ripple effect. So if the decision is to go into a world that is not known, or the value of it is not understood, then again, the support is not there to encourage them to continue and go into that sort of direction. And that is, I'm coming from a personal experience, sort of how I see the industry and how it can evolve, so that we can see it from the inside out, as opposed to what has been done and how it looks like. So I think, again, it's platforms like these to get the word out there, to understand what it is that we're doing, what the industry is all about. And then the other bridge, as Michelle mentioned, of those that are already within the industry doing it maybe differently, but not to say that their different is not worthy, and merging these two worlds. Yeah.
And a large one as well is representation. So Susie Ellis has the Scholarship for Equity and Wellness, which is such a great step. So that girl in the village who's going to see, another, woman who looks like her, doing what she loves authentically, is going to say, wow, if she can, I can. Representation makes
Ab-
all the difference. And in the current, scheme of things, it's amazing to see that platforms and establishments like GWI and many others alike are taking a stand to be more inclusive. And when that happens, I think the rest, it will only unfold naturally.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Can you share some of the interesting that you find practices from around Africa that you think we could bring to the forefront in wellness beyond what we've talked about already, like ingredients? What are some of the routines or rituals that you think would be great to segue into wellness practices?
Wow.
Yeah, I think we
That
can.
is, wow.
Right
Oh,
up your alley.
Lisa, we need 1 hour just for this one. I'll start off with, Southern Africa, or maybe all across Africa, is the use of sonic instruments. We're all familiar with sound baths and gong baths, but in Africa as well, sound and vibration was used as a medium to transport people, a medium to, to change energy, somatically. So I think the use of these beautiful sonic instruments that not many people know of is a beautiful way to integrate. They're not difficult to play. It just needs, to be respected, of course. But I think the instruments, there is Credo Mutwa, who was a Zulu shaman. He is late now, rest his soul, but he spoke about umbilini. Umbilini, now in India, we're familiar with kundalini. But
Mhm.
did you know that in Zulu shamanism, there is umbilini, which is very much the same, the channeling of energy from your root right to the crown with the use of breath and certain movements from the body mechanics. So I think different breathwork practices, the San in Namibia, where in the Marianne's background, they have something called a healing dance, which I was fortunate to be able to take one of my retreat groups to go witness last year. So they have a healing dance, and they also use very powerful breath work as they stomp and connect with the earth. So I think, practices like these, I could go on forever, but
Please do.
I
those
just
Tell us
got
are,
some more. Those are fascinating.
yeah,
I just
yeah.
got goose shivers. It's so rich. It's so yeah, it's unlike what the world has seen and experienced. And they go into a trance, the sun people, as they dancing, they go into a trance and they channel that, and it's just beautiful. Yeah, go for it. Sorry.
And you've got the smoking rituals with the Himba
The
women,
himba.
the smoke baths, so there is nothing, it was amazing. So practices like that, being planted in the ground. There is one in the Igbo tribe of Nigeria, where one is planted into the earth. Um, and it's a beautiful way of, reconnecting and being
Grounding.
grounded.
Yeah, what
Um,
the West will call grounding, walking barefoot, they probably immerse you completely. And yeah.
It's fascinating.
just to name a few.
It's wonderful that those are being collected, because they're so spread out. I mean, is there a resource for people, maybe listeners, to learn about some of these? Where do you find out what's happening in the different countries?
At the moment, Lisa, there are a lot of resources. There are a lot of novels. But the thing is that they're all, widespread. There isn't one which is collated. So this is where we come into place,
Mhm.
and this is our goal. And we will start with our quarterly newsletter and as well as on our landing page, start to add, authors, white papers, practices where in video, so mixed media that would then collate all of these beautiful practices, and not just for educational purposes, but also a theory that one can take and adapt to their own modern life. So we'll be sharing a lot of that. So people can keep posted on the AWI LinkedIn page. That's where we'll keep sharing a lot of this wisdom.
That's wonderful. It's fascinating. Have you had any success working with hospitality brands who might be able to help carry these messages across a wider area of Africa?
I think the interest is there, definitely, because now that it is under the AWI or a formal sort of setting, we're getting inquiries, people wanting to know and understand what it is. It's still early stages, but I think soon enough we will definitely open up to those industries or those brands to connect with us, or maybe even tap into whoever's on our database that we're collecting.
Yeah, we haven't tackled that
It's another
task as yet, to be honest.
Another one on your long list, in addition to your day jobs, of course. How can listeners support you or get involved should they want to? You've mentioned the LinkedIn page for the African Wellness Initiative, so they should go there and follow that. What else are some things that we could help you do?
We have if one is a practitioner, a spa manager, just doing anything under the umbrella of wellness on the continent of Africa, your presence in any form is going to undeniably support the initiative, because we need more of us together. So a unified Africa, and we'll figure out, where the strengths or where the roots can be connected. So we're practitioners, we're building the database. Spa managers, we're looking at developing the training pillar of the AWI. So just being in touch with you, knowing what you're able to offer, what we can share, but also knowing how we can support you, as it's a 360 movement.
And your contact info. Go ahead, Mariane.
No, I was going to say that it's actually 100% what Michelle just said.
Your contact information is on your LinkedIn page where people could email you if they'd like to.
Yes.
And also on the GWI website, I should mention, where the initiatives live. I'm sure your contact information is there.
Yeah.
So let's close with I'd like to hear your dream of the future of African wellness. In 10 years, what will be happening if you're successful?
I would like to say when we are successful.
When we are.
Very good.
I would say, Lisa, it's more of authentic custodians on the forefront, delivering and showcasing. When you hear Africa, you think wellness, you think healing, you think transformation. And the custodians who delivering that are delivering it in a sense that there is pride, there is authenticity, and they are being well compensated and looked after and being protected. So for me, that is what success would look like. All these hidden gems up to the surface, but protected at the same time.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree with you more. The authenticity part, the protection of the custodians, understanding and finally realizing their value the custodians, that it is not a dying craft, that it is brought to the fore and that the world can experience, but responsibly.
Well, these are wonderful messages, and we so appreciate your time today. It's a fascinating story, and you have a big job ahead of you, but I think you're up to it. The two of you are so passionate about what you're doing, and we want to help you in the wellness community.
Thank you, Lisa. You
bring
just
these
broke up again.
practices. We want to help you in the wellness community to bring these practices to the forefront. It is a beautiful thing. Can you hear me now?
Thank you.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
So
Yeah.
I'd like
Thank
to
you very
thank I'd like to thank you, Mariane Akwenye, Managing Director of the Nomad Group from Namibia, and Michelle Saudan, founder and facilitator of Amanzi Wellbeing based in Zimbabwe and Dubai. But both citizens of the world, but passionate citizens of Africa first. So wonderful story. Thank you so much for sharing with us today.
Thank you, Lisa. We appreciate the opportunity and the platform. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you so much, Lisa.
You are welcome.